couple weeks ago, you might have gotten the memo from me. I like Madagascar. None of the movies are full-on spectacular, but as fun romps through the wild and into bizarrely meaningful stories about the animal kingdom, they do their jobs well. But in case the film trilogy wasn't enough, DreamWorks were eager to make it a big media franchise with video games, holiday specials, and spin-off shows. The first of which focused on the cute and cuddly commandos, the penguins of Madagascar. There was a time, not too long ago, where a major computer animation studio making a weekly TV series was a novel concept. CGI shows were niche and experimental. This wasn't DreamWorks' first attempt, but it was the first to not be an abject failure. The Penguins of Madagascar was quite popular in its time, I can attest. I was there at the start, and while I don't remember anything beyond the very start of season 2, I knew it at least started off quite well. Can it measure up to the movies? That's what I want to know. That's what you want to know. And to know, we must learn first. Like I said in my Madagascar review, the first movie grew out of an abandoned Beatles parody featuring a quartet of penguins. They were changed to a commando unit and repurposed as comic relief for the Madagascar project. But come on, they were envisaged as stars, they kept performing well with focus groups, stardom was only a dream away. Their first starring role was as a short preceding DreamWorks' following film, Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. That movie premiered in October, so, of course, it was set on Christmas. It just seems to come earlier every year. This short was a hit, and while a sequel to Madagascar was in development, DreamWorks began devising a TV show about the penguins and, in October 2006, announced a multi-series partnership with Nickelodeon. Debate time, does this count as a Nicktoon? The definition is flexible, so it depends on how strict yours is. If you mean any cartoon so much as co-produced by Nickelodeon, then sure. But if you mean a cartoon created within the confines of Nick Animation Studios, with characters initially devised for the purposes of representing Nickelodeon and Nicktoons, not so much. I'll put it in the maybe pile, but this isn't as important as who they got to run it. In December 2007, it was announced that instead of the directors of Madagascar, Eric Darnell and Tom McGrath, that the executive producers were Bob Shuley and Mark McCorkle, having just finished work on Kim Possible. They'd had a history of producing televised adaptations of Disney movies before then, so this was a good call. Darnell and McGrath would still provide creative consultation, with McGrath reprising his role as Skipper, and Andy Richter reprising his role as Mort. Sadly, there wasn't any space for Darnell's voices. Aww. The Penguins of Madagascar, named so even though they're from Antarctica, don't fuss over it, brand recognition, premiered as a sneak peek on Nick on November 28th, 2008. Animation Magazine claims that this was watched by 14 million people. But TV by the Numbers listed the more modest rating of 4.2 million, unaware it had no connection to Escape to Africa, which had already released earlier that month. To avoid further confusion, the rest of Season 1 started on March 28, 2009, also drawing a massive audience of 6.1 million. It wasn't just commercially successful, but critically as well. This show won 11 Emmys. I'm not making this up, and I didn't miscount. 11 Emmys, including one for Outstanding Animated Program in Prime Time, one of the most prestigious awards in the animation industry, and Nickelodeon's only win. Pigeon Man? No thanks. Band Geeks? Get out of here! Tales of Ba Sing Se? You're kidding me! The Return of the Revenge of Dr. Blowhole is where it's at, according to the Emmys. The show ran for 3 seasons, the first 2 being pretty long, but the third prepped for meandering. It stopped airing on the main channel in November 2012, succumbing to the Nicktoons treatment, its last 7 segments airing there from February 2015 to January 4th of the year it all went wrong. There's some confusion over whether the episodes aired on that date actually aired a lot earlier in 2013, but I'm going with the worst option, ergo most realistic for the Nicktoons network. This is one of only a couple Nickelodeon cartoons from this era to have always been mostly well received and fondly remembered. But was it just pop culture references and dancing animals with a fart joke once in a while? Or was it a legitimate extension of the Madagascar movies?
Dr. Kowalski.
These readings are off the charts!
We'll get bigger checks. Take it out of petty cash.
While continuity with the movies is slim, to the point Tom McGrath considers it an alternate timeline, it's implied later on that Skipper, Kowalski, Rico, and Private have gone on adventures well outside the Central Park Zoo before, but they're back there now with new neighbors from Madagascar. King Julian, Maurice, and Mort are also attractions now, and Julian's gonna party any chance he gets, sometimes causing problems with the penguins and their many outlandish plans. Interactions between the penguins and lemurs were rare in the movies, so there was no harm in making this a big selling point for the show, and them being so different in temperaments and objectives is a good reason to pair them up in a comedy show. But this isn't just a comedy, it's got a lot of action, a lot of drama, and a touch of romance once in a while. Are these birds up to it? Skipper, the leader, is as psychotic as ever. Everything's some kind of conspiracy to him, and he's always ready to take something down if it means a thrilling mission. But he's absolutely competent in a lot of areas, and really cares about his unit. It's still fun to have this proud hardhead as the leader, as it fits the adventures they go on. The youngest operative, Private, is fittingly the most friendly and innocent. He functions as the heart of the group, and the one most willing to help others with more personal struggles. With a group this kooky, you need a guy like Private to unwittingly keep them in check. Kowalski was originally just the analyst of the group, but Bob and Mark have morphed him into an inventor here, obsessed with science and technology. Still the designated only smart one, but I love the embellishments they made. If I had to choose a favorite character, it would be Kowalski, and not just because his role brings the show closer to my beloved Invention of the Week formula. Rico is the wild one who can barely speak and is always ready to blow something up. A joy to have on any mission, and beyond that, he has some more sensitive interests to give him a more layered personality. There's many passing mentions of Manfredi and Johnson, former members who have mysteriously fallen in battle. For most of the show, it's a complete mystery how they left the team, but you have to feel bad considering how much bad luck they got themselves into. King Julian is not the same as ever, still a clueless and party-loving lemur, but there's a more bossy and selfish side to him, making him considerably less likable here. While he had a big head in the movies, it was generally an airhead too, but in this show, he can be exhausting for many reasons, as if caging him up in a zoo wasn't doing wonders for his temperament. He's not bad here, but be prepared to love him a little less when you've really gotten to know him. Maurice is still King Julian's right-hand man, and given a fairer shake, there's more to latch on to him as a TV show character, and more chances to explore why he's so loyal to this guy. Sometimes it's because he has to be. They've got a symbiotic relationship that's only ever broken up by Mort, an absolute freak for King Julian by this point. He's still funny when need be, but they don't have to dedicate whole episodes to his obsession over the king's anatomical endpoints. The monkeys, Mason and Phil, are also attractions again. Their dynamic hasn't changed much, but they're there when the writers have something new for them to do. That rarely ever comes around. There's more to the zoo than just these established figures. The most prominent new regular is Marlene, also known as Holy Smokes Wikipedia, cool the brakes! An otter bred in captivity who's comfortable within the confines of the zoo and nowhere else. Her interactions with the penguins always lead to something interesting. Bert the elephant is dumb and clumsy, but that's John DiMaggio doing his Billy Burford voice. I was missing him. Joey is a Joey with a bad Australian accent, that's always a fun accent to mangle. Butter and Bing are gorillas who act like mafia men, fine as once-in-a-while characters. Outside the zoo, you have Roger, an alligator who's much friendlier than he appears, with dreams of making it to Broadway. Looks can be deceiving, and Roger proves that by being one of the most pleasant tertiary characters whenever they use him. There's a squirrel in a neighboring park called Fred, who's just kinda dumb. Well, he starts off as that, but they wring better comedy out of him with time. There's a stray cat the penguins bump into from time to time called Max. Poor guy's always in an unlucky situation, but I'm there for another Wayne Knight performance. Among the antagonistic figures our heroes have to deal with is Alice, the zookeeper, who's just kind of grumpy and bored with her job and has no tolerance for the animals planning anything. Her general lack of enthusiasm for her lot in life contrasts well with the penguins, but I prefer Officer X as a villain. He's a hyper-competent animal control officer who the penguins continuously beat and continuously knock into worse jobs. Every time he appears, he's incrementally more pitiful. It's a feeling to watch transpire. The Vesuvius twins are just some rich twins who like to torture animals. They're there for dark humor, but are my least favorite recurring villains for there not being much levity to them. Animal foes include the Rat King, a buff rat who lives in the sewers. He's okay, better than the Vesuvius twins at least. The pigeon, Frankie, has a strange backstory. You see, he always wanted to be a good feather, but they couldn't let him in because he was a John Travolta impersonator, and John Travolta didn't appear in Goodfellas, so he's left all on his own, causing trouble for New York and retaliation. This backstory is something I just made up completely. Who knows who Frankie is, or how Jeff Bennett got so good at doing a John Travolta voice.
Hey penguins, I guess I got the drop on you. I'm walking here. You got a problem with that skateboard, boy? You're lucky my cop with tunnels acting up, or it would be so on.
Hans is a puffin and one of Skipper's mortal enemies. He's the reason Skipper's no longer welcome in Denmark. It's good to have a bird who's so comparable to Skipper in smarts in combat, giving him a reason to be the way he is. The Red Squirrel is one of the most mysterious villains they face because for a long time, he's been so secretive that he's driven many good men to paranoia. There's something about him that makes him more foreboding than a lot of other villains, most except for Dr. Blowhole, Skipper's full-blown nemesis, a super genius dolphin who gets around with a scooter and lobster minions. Whoever decided Neil Patrick Harris should be a dolphin supervillain who later gets his own song was possibly running a fever, but we got a fitting main villain for the show out of it, something mad but threatening. This is a big cast, one I've been assessing for a lot longer than I thought I would. Where am I relative to the Madagascar review? What made Madagascar a little revolutionary in its day was its animation. Yeah, that's how long. But there's still a few minor characters I had to gloss over to save time. If there's one subtraction from the movies, it's that some of the regulars are no longer voiced by their theatrical voice actors. Only Skipper, Mort, and Mason are voiced by the same people as in the first movie, and Rico had already been taken over by John DiMaggio early on to great effect. That's the thing, they're nearly all portrayed by seasoned voice actors now, which is its own benefit as it allows them to put their own spin on them and make them more suited for the spin-off.
I just want to slap a hippie.
Key to making the show work was differentiating the penguins and giving them their own types of stories. Skipper's got the intense and confrontational ones, Kowalski's in the invention of the week routine, Private is given more sensitive matters to attend to, and you never know what to expect from Rico. I wasn't expecting Bob and Mark to sneak this in. Dude, seriously, nice touch. But they're all still one cohesive unit that would fall apart if one of the pieces was taken out. Given that in the Madagascar movies, Skipper and Private were the only ones with particularly noteworthy personality traits, this was warranted. Those 11 Emmys don't win themselves. Most of the other characters get introductory episodes with follow-ups that acknowledge what happened before. It's light continuity, but most of the episodes are watchable in any order. With the villains, you can still see the Star Command and Kim Possible people were behind it and how they're handled. They don't always get stronger every time they're seen, but their arcs are played around with more. It's mostly about making something thrilling and entertaining, not always super mature, but like the movies, it's for kids. And I'm not saying that as an excuse, just that they knew the demographic of grown-ups would be much smaller, until they grow up and review them. And I don't know what it is with CGI cartoons, CGI Nickelodeon cartoons in particular, but this show feels super strange whenever it gets kind of strange. Like, in 2D, there's a barrier to how realistic everything can feel, while in a 3D space, seeing stuff like this is considerably more surreal. I have to make a video on this phenomenon and what exactly makes cartoony shenanigans less natural in CGI cartoons, but it's generally well done in this show. It's not overbearing, like you could accuse something like Back at the Barnyard of being with it. It helps that the animation is good. It's one of the better looking computer animated shows of the era. By 2008, it wasn't the pioneering days anymore. It depended on if the characters moved well, the visual effects worked, and if they could get them finished in the much stricter TV production pipeline. Considering the Madagascar movies were technically impressive for converting more classical character animation into 3 dimensions, this proved to be a challenge. DreamWorks modeled everything, but they were then rigged and animated at Nick using Maya. Detail is down and the movement isn't as extravagant after the first few episodes, but as a weekly series, it works as well as you'd expect. It worked well for the Emmys anyway.
Give to me your peanuts.
In the early episodes, the absence of the New York Giants is felt. Echoes of Alex and Marty were left in as the flags, but it's not enough to hide that something is missing from the series. They plugged that hole before too long by gradually introducing most of the new characters I went over. The possibilities have a limit, as the main sets are the zoo, park, city, and sewer system. They cram a lot into these places, and set up that heading out any further means it's a special occasion. The lighter continuity elements unfold naturally. Skipper will bring up his past with the Danes and Dr. Blowhole, with both getting more light shed on them by season's end. It's still mostly set up, holding out for the later episodes to pay things off.
There's nothing there. Nothing but pretzel salt.
Evening, boys. This is where I rub some salt into the wound.
Season 2 was originally a 26 episode order like Season 1, but got a 13 episode extension somewhere along the way, bringing it up to 39. Well, this is the same length as Phineas and Ferb's second season, and that's bursting with gem after gem. I don't think the Penguins of Madagascar were given the time to make every episode special within the time they were given. The good ones are a cut above Season 1, so there is some progress being made with the world and the crew's comfort with it, but I think there are more misfires here than Season 1, more episodes that feel like a rough pitch stretched out for 11 minutes with no goal in sight. It doesn't get too consistently lackluster, which puts it above a lot of Nickelodeon cartoons from around this time, but I wish it were more consistently good, because when Season 2's good, it's really, really good for what they have. The specials are getting very big now, and always give you something more elaborate, dramatic, and off the wall to look forward to. You gotta be alert, look alive, be prepared for anything. If you notice anything off tilt, good for you, thanks for paying attention.
Sounds like the kind of job we can sink our teeth into. Huh?
Beaver humor, boys. Get used to it.
It's a pity this season's a lot shorter than the rest and didn't all air on Nick, because I think it's the best. While the first season was focused on setup and the second on payoff, 3 wanted to conclude things, finish up Marlene's difficulties in venturing outside the zoo, show who Doris the Dolphin is and how Kowalski could have had a relationship with her, put Officer X in his place a few more times. They gotta make a show that felt like a cohesive set of stories, while succeeding in this silly episodic format too. By the end, there were 80 half hours, which is a number any animated series should be lucky to get to, no matter the network. This is a show I'd say is rewarding to sit through the entirety of, or at least the major events. There really needs to be one of those anime canon list websites but for Western shows, so you know which Penguins episodes are appointment TV. Or you could listen to me. A visit from Uncle Nigel is about Private introducing the gang to his ditzy uncle, who actually has a smart interior when no one but him and Private is around. There's a lot of Private being tethered to odd characters across the show, and this is one of my favourite attempts at that, while unveiling an enemy long thought dead. Littlefoot closes the book on Marlene turning into a gremlin when she leaves captivity. The demon's taken out of her, and then put back in, easier to control. While there isn't much more they do with her after this, it's good to see the issue get resolved before time ran out. The secret treasure of the golden squirrel is a half hour, but more on the simple and effective end. There's this treasure that turns the group against each other by showing them their deepest desires. That's interesting, and how they get there and get over it is meaty enough. It's About Time, yes, another one of these, is our little time travel altercation. Not as elaborate as it could have been, but it's fun to see Kowalski unintentionally mess with Private and Skipper and make the timeline more broken. The return of the revenge of Dr. Blowhole is where New York is taken over by a dolphin and forced karaoke. But what's more interesting is Dr. Blowhole wiping Skipper's memory and leaving him to die, but he's able to get his mojo back with the help of a guiding spirit. Alex the Lion, what the heck are you doing in my spin-off? Wishful thinking proves that this zoo is haunted. The wishing fountain actually makes people's wishes come true on the spot, no matter how extreme, and what comes out of that is something chaotic and captivating. Our man in Gerfer Jickelstan brings us back to Buck Rockgut, the least put together of the Penguin's allies, who seeds discontent among them by claiming one of them is a sleeper agent for the Red Squirrel. If you haven't seen the episode yet and you can accurately guess who the sleeper agent is, include the word monkey in your comment. Not saying it being predictable is bad, it makes it funnier actually. Mental Hen gives us the silliest foe in the city, a chicken that's very good at sport bets. The conclusion is simple, but a new romantic subplot opens up at the oddest possible time. This is followed through on in Pelt, where the Mental Hen tricks Skipper into thinking he's losing his agility. She's got a freeze ray now. Cool. It's better for being more of a character story at first, then hitting you with the funny. Hello Dollface introduces Private's love for the Lunicorns, a franchise starring a purple unicorn voiced by Tara Strong. It's good living in October 9th, 2010 and knowing that such a franchise is well out of anyone's understanding, much less in a state where it can be enjoyed by older men. Best part for me is Rico's doll getting a Lunicorn voice box, which turns him into a hippie. What a stable relationship. Command Crisis has Skipper turning into a news reporter, making a mission more difficult for his associates. If Tom McGrath's voice wasn't made for barking orders, it was made for barking friendly misinformation. Fit to Print is one big comedy of errors, as every attempt the Penguins make to suppress their secret that's been caught on camera for zoo press ends up backfiring. But the ending puts a more colourful spin on the tale, showing that sometimes an art piece can be just as good of a marketing tool. Operation Lunicorn Apocalypse is another fun combination of a very nutty premise with a strong execution. An ancient spirit played by Conan O'Brien is trapped inside Private's toy unicorn, but still wreaks as much havoc as it can, and that's a lot. Is there anything else you want? Is there anything else you expect? Can't you see how this show won 11 Emmys? Operation Antarctica gets back to the roots of the Madagascar franchise, animals devouring each other. Private meets a young seal named Hunter who doesn't want to eat him until she seems to develop the urge to. Perhaps it isn't as serious as Madagascar 1 in effect, but they still got an emotionally powerful story out of it. Same can be said for my favourite episode, The Penguin Who Loved Me. Doris had been an off-handed joke for the whole series, but near the very end, they explained why she and Kowalski were incompatible. And if this is the ultimate send-off for Dr. Blowhole on top of that, then they had to pull out all the stops. But if there are any episodes you should be cautious of, it's this selection. Operation Big Blue Marble is not how to do an environmental episode. Kowalski creates a new invention that produces the best snack ever, but its emissions prove to be dangerous. It's not a fun feeling to be preached to, no matter how cool the intentions are. Rockabye Birdie is the baby episode where Skipper becomes baby. Cute, but big plot hole. His finishing move on the Rat King is a poot, but they're in a sewer. The Rat King can't be that stunned by bad smells. Feels like they forgot where they were for a moment. Night of the Vesuviuses is about the Twitty twins getting the zoo to themselves somehow, and a flawed attempt to turn them good. It's a Vesuvius Twins episode. Next. Happy King Julian Day was a bad omen, coming quite early and revealing that they were not going to get King Julian's characterization all that right very much. There was a sinking feeling that set in here. Pets Peeved is a Vesuvius Twins episode. Them torturing Skipper and Julian is less amusing than what happened in Rome on that day in 79 AD. Kanga Management puts the koala and Joey together, and the results are as Australian as possible. I like my neighbours, but like in the episode, being next to them is kind of embarrassing. Feline Fervor is about Julian getting mistakenly adopted as a cat and trying to woo over this Zoe fella. It's really hard to top his fling with Sonia, which proves that most of the time, this version of Julian lacks the charisma needed to make an engaging story. The Otter Woman is a dumb one, and it knows that it's dumb. Marlene gets bleached white, and everyone mistakes her for a completely different animal. This goes nowhere, it's just an idiot plot in case you thought the characters were too smart. Stop Bugging Me is one of the grosser episodes. I'm thankful they didn't go as hard with it as other Nickelodeon cartoons. However, this whole scheme of Private needing to cover himself in roaches shows us the upper limit of what they could do. The worst episode for me has to be Roomies. Marlene gets a new buddy for her enclosure, but it turns out to be a rude walrus who makes her life miserable. This is all the zoo's fault for putting an otter and a walrus in the same enclosure and expecting nothing bad to happen. But when Rhonda here gets sent to Hoboken by the penguins, she proves herself to be a competent spy for Dr. Blowhole out of nowhere, and this isn't followed up on the second time she appears in the Hoboken surprise. If they didn't make this episode, I think they would have gotten at least 12 Emmys. I'm just spitballing. So now with this whole show done and dusted, what else is there to talk about? Other than the movie. In November 2014, DreamWorks released Penguins of Madagascar. No "the" in the title, that's important. It lets you know this has no connection to the show. Most of the movie cast is back, of course, and the events pick up right where Europe's Most Wanted left off, making this a little less of a spin-off and more of an honorary Madagascar 4. It took a long time for this movie to get finished, the franchise's whole existence if you want to get technical. It was originally meant to be a direct-to-video movie, but eventually went theatrical and got a new set of writers and directors. I wonder if the head of story's done anything I'd like. And despite the popularity of the TV series, the movie underperformed when it finally released, setting DreamWorks back a bit financially. This was their last movie to be animated by Pacific Data Images, so while the end of an era, I don't want to give the impression the era ended on a downer note. This'll be brief, because the impression I want to leave is my verdict. This is a very good movie, not much for adults, even compared to the prior Madagascar movies, but it ties the second as being the strongest, and I think beats it in being a consistently fun experience. There's this feeling they're using the movie to just do whatever they want. A thriller's in the air at all times. They wanted to do another cutesy backstory where our heroes are taken away from their home, so it's in the film. They wanted them infiltrating Fort Knox, meeting Benedict Cumberbatch as a wolf, traveling the world, falling out of a plane, having a John Malkovich octopus rival whose backstory is he was never seen as cute enough by zoo-goers, dressing up in lederhosen. It's like the filmmakers are nutty kids who are given complete control of their own film. Restraint is minimal in how big the story is and how far the animation goes. Since Europe's Most Wanted, Hollywood had grown out of that 3D revival phase of the early 2010s, but there was still an incentive to keep the series grand and make the visuals pop. It's a very bouncy and colourful movie, up to and including the big mutant crisis that Private has to avert. Yup, Private's given the character arc here. He's the one whose skills and experience are tested the most by the film, not just in the climax, but in how the others, especially Skipper, see him as a docile little brother figure. His heart tucked into the script. But if that doesn't get your heart pumping, there's romance too, with Kowalski hooking up with this owl, Eva, who works with their competing North Wind organization. Even in the Prime continuity, Kowalski is still a chick magnet. Good way to end it. And very good that the last time we saw these guys, they were as cute and cuddly as possible. If DreamWorks ever wants to bring them back for another movie, they have my support. But as for the show, it's good we have it as a special diversion. The penguins are characters people were clamoring to see more of, and only an 80-episode series like this could quench the public's thirst. I'm not saying it's one of my new favourite Nickelodeon cartoons, but it's not bad, and not among their lesser efforts I've covered. Sometimes it can get wrapped up in this idea that only kids are paying attention to them, but I can see why they thought that. The Madagascar movies were made with kids in mind first, not that adults couldn't enjoy them. And most of the time on this show, there is a sense that they're just doing what they found funny and weird. There's a lot you can do with these little guys, and I'm happy that what they did was produce a funny and memorable show.